The alien widow sat alone in the dust. Her body was thin, her skin pale, and her lips dry. She had not eaten for many days. Around her flies circled in the hot air, crawling on her arms and face, but she was too weak to push them away. She had a family. Once, she had a husband who stood strong by her side. But war had taken him, and with his death, her place in the tribe was lost. Now she was nothing, only a starving widow that no one wanted. The people of her village passed, her without looking. They whispered behind her back, calling her cursed, saying she only brought misfortune. Some spat at her feet. Others laughed at her hollow face. She wanted to shout at them, to tell them she was still alive, that she still needed food, water, kindness. But her voice had grown too weak, and even if she spoke, no one would listen. Her body trembled as she tried to stand, but her legs gave way. She fell back into the dirt, a sharp pain running through her thin bones. Tears burned in her eyes, but they did not fall. Even her tears had dried away. She thought of her husband's last day when he had promised to protect her. His words had kept her alive for months, but now only hunger filled her thoughts. Hunger and the buzzing of flies that swarmed her like vultures waiting for death. She closed her eyes, wishing for sleep that would never end. If she died here, no one would care. No one would bury her body. She would be left for the wild animals. The thought no longer frightened her. It almost felt like release. But as her breath slowed and her body sank deeper into the dirt, a sound broke the silence. Footsteps, they were heavy, strong, not like the soft shuffle of her people. The steps came closer, stirring dust in the air. She forced her eyes open. A figure stood over her, blocking the sun. For a moment, her heart stopped. It was not one of her kind. It was something strange, something she had only heard stories about. A human. He looked down at her with sharp, tired eyes. His clothes were torn from travel, his boots covered in dirt. A bag hung at his side, but it looked nearly empty. He was not rich, not strong in body, but there was something in his gaze that made her chest tighten. Unlike her people, he did not spit, did not laugh, did not call her cursed. He simply looked at her. The widow's lips parted, but no sound came out. She wanted to tell him to leave. She wanted to tell him she was nothing, that he should not waste his time. But before she could, his hand moved. Slowly, carefully, he reached into his bag and pulled out a small piece of bread. It was dry, hard, barely enough to fill even a child's stomach. But to her eyes it looked like treasure. Her heart raced. Why would he do this? Why would he give food to her, a stranger, an abandoned widow? She searched his face, expecting a trick, a cruel joke. But his eyes were steady, his hand firm as he held out the bread toward her trembling fingers. She shook her head weakly. "Why?" she whispered, her voice so faint it was almost lost in the wind. The human's lips curved into a faint, tired smile. His answer was simple, because no one else will. Her chest ached. Her people had left her, called her useless. Yet this human, who owed her nothing, who had so little himself, was offering his last meal. She could see it in his eyes. He had no more food. This was not a gift from plenty. This was sacrifice. Her pride screamed at her not to take it. She was raised never to beg, never to accept pity, to live or die by her own strength. But her body, weak and starving, betrayed her. Her hand reached out, shaking, and touched the bread. The human did not pull away. He only placed it gently into her palm. The moment it touched her lips, her world changed. The taste of bread filled her mouth, dry yet rich, the most precious thing she had ever eaten. Her body shivered as if life itself was pouring back into her veins. Tears finally escaped her eyes, running down her dirty cheeks. She ate slowly, afraid that if she rushed, it would vanish like a dream. The human knelt beside her, pulling a flask from his side. He uncapped it and held it to her lips. The water was warm, but it felt like the sweetest river. She drank greedily, coughing, then drank again. For the first time in days, she felt alive. When she finished, she looked at him again. "You should not have done this," she whispered. "Now you will starve." But the human only shook his head. His voice was quiet, steady, filled with something she could not understand. "Better I starve than leave someone to die." The words struck her harder than any blow. For a long moment, she stared at him, her mind unable to believe what she had heard. She was nothing, abandoned, left for the flies. Yet here he was, a stranger, choosing her life over his own. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, the widow realized something she had not felt since her husband's death. A spark of hope flickered inside her chest. For the first time in a long time, she was not alone. The widow's hand shook as she held the last crumbs of bread. Every bite had burned her throat and filled her empty stomach with a fire she thought was lost forever. Yet even as her body clung to life, her mind was full of questions. This human given his food to her? Why waste his strength on someone everyone else had abandoned? She raised her weak eyes toward him. The human sat on the ground a short distance away, his back against a rock, his bag nearly empty beside him. He looked tired, almost as hungry as she felt, yet he had not taken even a single bite for himself. He only sat there, breathing steady, watching the horizon as if waiting for something. Her lips trembled. "You gave me everything," she whispered, her voice dry. "Why?" The human turned his head toward her, his expression calm. "'Cause no one else will," he repeated the same words as before. But now, as she looked deeper into his eyes, she saw something more than pity. She saw determination, a silent promise that went beyond food. The widow wanted to cry. Her people had mocked her weakness, had left her in the dirt to die like trash. Yet this stranger, from another world, treated her as if she was worth saving. The thought both comforted and terrified her. Her pride whispered inside her heart, "Don't trust him. Don't lean on him. Don't beg like a beggar. If he leaves tomorrow, the pain will be worse." But her body shivered with cold, and her stomach twisted in hunger. She knew she could not survive alone much longer. The human spoke again, his voice soft but steady. "You should try to rest. Tomorrow will be hard." His words confused her. "Tomorrow." He nodded slowly. "If you want to live, we must move. This place is killing you." The widow's heart raced. Move. She could barely stand. Every step felt like fire in her bones. "I cannot," she said weakly, shaking her head. "I will only slow you down. Leave me. Save yourself." But the human leaned forward, his eyes sharp with something she could not name. "I will not leave you. If I gave you my last meal, then I have already chosen. Your life matters." Her breath caught in her throat. Earth. His words struck her harder than the hunger ever had. She wanted to argue, to push him away before hope could wound her again. Yet when she looked at his face, she could not speak. There was no lie there, no trick, only truth. She turned her head, ashamed. "If my people see you with me, they will punish you. They call me cursed. They will call you cursed too." The human's jaw tightened, but he did not look afraid. "Then, let them try," he said simply. "I'd rather face them than leave you here." The widow's heart trembled. She had heard stories of humans, wild creatures from a death world, dangerous, unpredictable. Some said they were cruel, others said they were clever liars. But none of the stories had prepared her for this. A human who would starve for her. A human who would stand against her own people for her. The sun began to sink lower, painting the sky in red and gold. The widow shivered as the air grew colder. She tried to curl into herself for warmth, but her body was too weak. Without a word, the human pulled off his outer cloak and placed it gently over her shoulders. The weight of the cloth shocked her. It was warm, still carrying the heat of his body. She clutched it tightly, her chest tightening with emotions she could not name. "Why do you do this?" she asked again, her voice breaking. The human's gaze softened. "Because I know what it means to be alone," he answered. Her heart stopped. Alone. Yes, she knew that word too well. The nights without her husband, the days when no one looked at her, the hunger, the silence, the flies. Loneliness was worse than hunger. worse than thirst. And this human, with his tired eyes and empty bag, understood it too. For a long moment, they sat together in silence, the cloak around her shoulders, the taste of bread still on her tongue. The widow felt something she had not felt in months' hope. Small, fragile, but alive. Yet fear still clung to her. If she allowed this hope to grow, what would happen when it was ripped away again? Could she survive that pain a second time? She wanted to push him away, to keep the wall around her heart, but her body betrayed her. She leaned slightly closer, her weak frame drawn to his warmth, to his quiet strength. The human did not move away. He only sat there, steady as stone, letting her breathe. Night fell slowly, the stars rising one by one. The widow's eyes grew heavy, her body finally surrendering to rest. Before sleep took her, she whispered a single thought, soft as a breath. Perhaps I was not abandoned. After all, the human heard her, but he said nothing. He only stayed awake, watching the dark horizon, guarding her as she slept. The first light of morning touched the ground, turning the dirt into pale gold. The widow opened her eyes slowly, her body stiff from the cold night. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the memory returned, the human, the bread, the water, the cloak still resting on her shoulders. She turned her head. The human was awake, sitting near the edge of the small camp. His back was straight, his eyes scanning the horizon, as if expecting danger. He had not slept. The thought sent a strange ache through her chest. Why would he stay awake for her? Hunger returned with sharp claws, twisting her stomach, but her pride rose like a wall. She wanted to ask for more food, but she could not. The human had already given her his last meal. If she begged for more, she would lose the final piece of dignity she still held. Her hands gripped the cloak tighter. She remembered the days before her husband's death, when she had walked proudly in the village, when her voice had carried weight, when no one dared mock her. Now she was nothing but a widow in the dirt. If she begged again, even to survive, would she not become less than nothing? The human noticed her movement. His voice was calm, steady. You should eat more. He said. Her heart jumped. Did he have more food? Her body screamed yes, but her pride screamed no. She shook her head, her voice weak but firm. You have nothing left. Do not waste on me. The human's lips pressed together, but he did not argue. Instead, he opened his bag and pulled out a small pouch. Inside were a few dried roots, hard. In bitter, he broke one in half and held it out to her. It is not much, but it will keep you alive. Her eyes locked on the root. Hunger roared inside her, louder than ever, but her pride made her hesitate. She felt shame burning in her chest. Her people had thrown her away. If she took this too, would she not prove them right that she was only a burden too weak to survive alone? Her voice cracked. Why give me this? You will starve. The human looked at her with calm eyes. I am strong enough. You are not. Eat. The simple words hit her harder than she expected. Strong enough was he truly. His frame was lean, his face pale, his bag nearly empty. Yet there was no doubt in his voice. He believed it. He believed he could carry them both. She stared at the root in his hand, her pride pulling her back, her hunger pulling her forward. Finally, her trembling fingers reached out. She touched the food, but before she took it, her shame burst out of her lips. Why would you save me, human? I am nothing. I have nothing to give you. The human's answer was quiet, almost a whisper, because no one else will. Her chest ached, the same words again. But now they cut deeper. No one else will. Her people, not her family. Only him. She took the root and bit down. The taste was bitter, dry, almost painful. But her body rejoiced, her stomach welcoming the strength. The tears blurred her eyes. She ate slowly, each bite a war between shame and need. The human watched her, not with pity, but with something steadier respect. He did not mock her weakness. He did not laugh as her people had. He only watched as if every bite was proof that she still lived. When she finished, she lowered her head. You should not help me, she whispered. My people will come. They see you with me, they will hurt you. The human shrugged lightly. Then I will stand. Her heart pounded. She could not understand him. Humans were supposed to be selfish, wild, dangerous. Yet this one gave food, gave water, gave his cloak, even risked his life. Her pride told her to reject him, to send him away before hope destroyed her again. But her hunger, her weakness, her loneliness, everything, pulled her closer. She closed her eyes, whispering more to herself than to him. If I survive because of you, then I owe you more than I can ever repay. The human's answer was steady, then survive. That is enough. His words struck her like a blade and a bomb at once. Survive. That was all he asked. It's not service. Not loyalty. Not repayment. Just survival. The morning grew brighter. The human rose to his feet and offered her his hand. She looked at it, hesitating. To take his hand would mean accepting his help again, accepting that she could not stand alone. Pride screamed no. Hunger, weakness, and a flicker of hope whispered yes. Her thin fingers trembled as they reached for his. His grip was firm, steady, lifting her up with ease. She wavered on her feet, but he did not let go. For the first time since her husband's death, she stood without falling. Her heart whispered a truth she tried to denial. Alone, she would die. With him, she might live. The widow's legs shook as she tried to walk. Every step felt like fire running through her bones, but the human's hand never let her fall. His grip was strong, steady, pulling her forward when her body begged to give up. For a long time, she had been crawling, waiting for death. But now she was moving again. The sun climbed higher, burning the ground under their feet. The human carried the heavy bag on his back. It was nearly empty, yet he held it as if it still had weight. He stopped often, letting her rest under patches of shade, offering her drops of water from his flask even. Though his own lips were cracked and dry, her eyes studied him when he was not looking. His clothes were torn, his boots worn, his body lean from travel. He looked as poor as she was, maybe poorer. Yet he carried himself with a strange strength, as if nothing in the world could make him bend. She could not understand it. Why fight for her? Why risk his life for a widow left to die? When they reached a cluster of rocks, the human lowered her down gently to sit. She leaned against the stone, breathing hard. Her chest rose and fell like she had run for miles, though they had not gone far. She knew she was slowing him down. The thought filled her with shame. You should leave me here, she whispered, her eyes low. I cannot walk far. I'll only kill you. The human crouched in front of her, his expression calm but unshakable. I will not leave you. Her throat tightened. You don't understand, she said, her voice trembling. If my people find us together, they will punish you. They called me cursed, cast me out. To be seen with me is to invite their hatred. The human's jaw tightened. His eyes, though tired, burned with fire. Then let them hate me, he said. I'd rather face them than abandon you. Her heart froze. His words were madness. No one defied her people. They were cruel, proud, quick to punish weakness. She had lived her whole life fearing their judgment. And now here was a stranger who dismissed it with a single breath. She looked at him with disbelief. You will die for me. The human shook his head. No. I will live, and so will you. Widow could not breathe. For a long moment silence wrapped around them, broken only by the buzzing of flies and the whisper of wind. Deep inside, something stirred, something she had buried with her husband's body. Hope. Dangerous, blinding hope. She turned her face away, ashamed. I am nothing, she whispered. I cannot give you anything. Not food, not shelter, not even safety. Why would you carry me? The human's voice was calm, but it struck her like thunder. Because no one else will. It's the same words again. Words that carried no demand, no bargain, only truth. She felt tears burning in her eyes, but she swallowed them down. She could not show weakness again, not to him. Psst. not to anyone. As the day stretched on, they kept moving. The widow's steps were weak, but the human matched his pace to hers. When she stumbled, he caught her. When she faltered, he waited. The journey was slow but steady, and with each step, she felt a strange strength building inside her, borrowed from him. But danger was never far. By evening, when the sun dipped low, they stopped near a dry riverbed. The human gathered sticks and lit a small fire. Its flames flickered weakly, but it pushed away the cold. He gave her the last piece of dried root, holding nothing for himself. She wanted to refuse, but hunger tore at her, and his steady eyes gave her no choice. She ate slowly, guilt burning with every bite. The widow's chest ached with a thought she could no longer hide. "She should not stay with me," she said softly. "If you keep helping me, your death will come." The human looked at the fire, his voice low but steady. "Death comes for everyone, but not tonight, not while I can still fight." She stared at him, her heart racing. He was mad, reckless, yet his madness gave her life. She wanted to tell him to leave, but the words stuck in her throat. For the first time, she feared not death but being left alone again. The night grew darker, the stars sharp above them. The widow lay close to the fire, wrapped in his cloak. Sleep pulled at her eyes, but her mind spun with fear. If her people found them, they would not forgive him. He was risking everything, his safety, his life for her, and for the first time, since her husband's death, she made a choice. A dangerous choice. If the human was willing to risk his life, then she would risk her heart. She would trust him. Her pride whispered against it. Pride told her to survive alone, to die alone, to never bow her head. But her hunger, her weakness, and the warmth of his cloak silenced her pride. She whispered into the night, words only the fire could hear. "I will not fight him anymore. I will follow." Her eyes closed, and for the first time in many nights, she slept without fear. The human stayed awake again, his eyes scanning the shadows, guarding her life as if it were his own. And somewhere in the silence, the widow realized her dangerous decision was not to keep living. It was to trust a human. The night was silent except for the crackling fire. The human sat near the flames, his eyes fixed on the dark horizon. His body was tired, his stomach empty, yet he did not close his eyes. The widow lay curled under his cloak, breathing softly, unaware of the danger moving in the distance. The human's ears caught something faint, a shuffle of feet, a low whisper carried by the wind. He did not move suddenly. Instead, his hands slowly closed around a rock beside the fire. His eyes narrowed. They were not alone. The widow stirred in her sleep. A strange feeling pushed her awake, and when her eyes opened, she saw the human sitting, tense, staring into the darkness. Her heart raced. "What is it?" she whispered weakly. He raised a hand, signaling her to stay silent. Then, from beyond the shadows, voices grew louder. "They are here," a harsh voice sneered. "The cursed widow still breathes." Another voice laughed coldly. "And look, she clings to a human. How pathetic." The widow's blood turned to ice. She knew those voices, her people, the same ones who had abandoned her, the same ones who had spit at her and left her in the dirt. They had returned not to help, but to mock and destroy. Her body trembled. She pulled the cloak tighter, whispering in fear, "They will kill you, run." But the human shook his head. His voice was calm, steady like stone. "I will not run." Shadows moved closer. Figures stepped into the weak light of the fire, 3 of them, tall and strong, their eyes filled with hate. One carried a long stick, sharpened into a spear. Another held a jagged piece of metal. They looked at the widow as if she was less than dirt. "You shame us," one spat. "You should have died with your husband. Now you cling to an outsider." Like a begging dog, the widow's heart cracked. She wanted to shrink, to vanish. But before she could speak, the human rose to his feet. He stood between her and them, his shoulders squared, his jaw set. He had no weapon, no armor, nothing but his bare hands. "Stay behind me," he whispered to her. Her breath caught. What? She could not believe it. This human, thin and tired, was ready. To fight 3 armed aliens to protect her, it was madness. Madness that made her heart burn with something stronger than fear. One of the men stepped forward, sneering. "You think you can protect her, human? She is cursed. She brings only death. Leave her and go, and we may spare you." The human's eyes did not waver. "No," he said firmly. "If you want her, you will go through me." The words struck the widow like thunder. No one had ever spoken for her like that, not since her husband's death. The 3 men laughed, cruel and sharp. "Very well," the leader snarled. "We will kill you first, then finish what we should have long ago." First man lunged with his spear, but the human moved faster than the widow thought possible. He stepped aside, grabbed the shaft, and twisted it with all his strength. The spear ripped from the attacker's hands, snapping against the rocks. The man fell back, stunned. The second rushed with the jagged metal, swinging wildly. The human ducked, low, driving his fist into the man's stomach. The sound of air leaving lungs echoed in the night. The man dropped to his knees, gasping. The widow's eyes widened. This was not the frail, starving creature she had imagined. This was something else, something her people had feared in whispers. A human from the death world, fighting with nothing but raw strength and will. The leader roared in anger and charged. Fists raised. He struck hard, but the human caught his arm and pulled him forward, slamming him to the ground. The firelight flickered wildly, casting shadows like monsters on the stone. The 3 men groaned, broken, humiliated. None dared rise again. The widow sat frozen, her heart racing. She could not believe what she had seen. 3 against 1, and the human stood victorious, his chest heaving but his eyes steady. He looked back at her, his voice calm even in the storm. "They will not touch you," he said. Tears filled her eyes. Her own people had left her, cursed her, thrown her away, yet this stranger had stood against them without fear. Her heart whispered something she was afraid to speak. Perhaps he was not just saving her life. Perhaps he was giving her a new one. The 3 men crawled away into the night, their threats fading with the wind. The human did not chase them. He only returned to the fire, his body heavy, his breaths deep. He sat down again, as if nothing had happened. The widow stared at him, her voice trembling. "Why? Why risk yourself for me? You could have died." He looked at her with calm eyes, the same steady fire still burning. "Because no one else will." Her heart broke again. This time it was not from Pennant. It was from something she had not felt in so long. Gratitude, hope. A spark of trust that grew stronger with every breath, as the fire crackled and the night grew quiet again. "Ooh, widow," whispered softly, almost to herself, perhaps. "I was never cursed at all." The human said nothing. He only sat watch again, guarding her through the shadows of the night. The fire had burned low, only red embers glowing in the ashes. The widow sat close to it, her body wrapped in the human's cloak, her eyes fixed on him. He sat a little distance away, his back straight, his breath steady, as if the fight from the night before had never happened. But she had seen it. She had seen 3 strong men fall before his bare hands. She had seen his eyes, sharp as steel, his movements fast and fearless, and it shook her to the core. Her people had always spoken of humans as reckless creatures, fragile bodies. Weak, compared to other races, surviving only through tricks and lies. Yet this man had stood against her kin with nothing but his fists, and she could still hear the sound of their groans, still see the dust rising as he threw them down like dry branches. The widow's voice broke the silence. "You could have died." The human turned his head, his expression calm, almost tired. "Yes," he said, "but you would have died too." Her chest tightened. No hesitation, no regret, only truth. He had risked his life not because he had to, but because he chose to. She lowered her eyes, ashamed. "I am not worth such danger." The human leaned forward slightly, his voice firm. "Every life is worth fighting for." The words struck her like fire. Her people had never spoken to her that way. To them, she was a curse, a burden, a mouth not worth feeding. But to him, she was still a life worth saving, Morning came slowly, the pale light painting the rocks in gray. As the human rose, stretching his stiff limbs, then offered his hand to her. She hesitated, pride whispering against it, but at last she placed her thin hand in his. He lifted her with ease, steadying her as she wavered on weak legs. They began to walk again. The land stretched empty around them, dry earth, scattered rocks, no sign of food or shelter. The widow's steps dragged, but the human never complained. He matched his pace to hers, stopping whenever she faltered. Her body screamed in pain, yet her eyes kept stealing glances at him. His frame was lean, his face drawn with hunger, his lips cracked from thirst. He was suffering too. Time she slowed, he gave her strength with a simple word: keep moving. At one point her knees buckled, and she fell to the ground, dust rising around her. She gasped for air, tears stinging her eyes. I cannot, she whispered. Leave me. The human knelt beside her, his voice sharp but steady. You can. You are stronger than you think. She shook her head, trembling. No, I am nothing. His hand pressed firmly against her shoulder. You are alive. That is enough. Her heart raced. She had heard many words in her life, words of judgment, of hate, of pity, but never words like these. Alive enough. His strength was not just in his body, it was in his spirit, a fire that burned without end. With his help, she rose again. Her legs shook, but she walked. Step by step, slow but steady. Each step felt like a victory, and though her pride whispered of shame, her heart whispered of hope. By midday, the heat grew unbearable. As the human stopped under a rock ledge, offering her shade, he handed her the flask. Only a few drops remained. She stared at it, then shook her head. No, you need it more. But he pressed it into her hands. Drink. Her throat ached. Her body cried out for water, but still she hesitated. He had already given too much, yet his eyes left no room for refusal. Slowly, she drank, the water warm but sweet. Guilt burned in her chest. Why? She whispered again. Why give me everything? What do you gain? The human looked at her, his expression calm but unyielding. Strength is not only for myself, it is for those who cannot stand alone. Her breath caught. She had never understood strength in this way. Her people had used strength to dominate, to crush, to cast out the weak. But this man used strength to lift, to shield, to protect. It was a strength she had never seen before. That night, when the stars filled the sky, the widow sat close to the fire again. The human rested with his back to a stone, his eyes half closed but still alert. She studied him in silence. He had given her food, water, warmth, protection. He had fought her enemies without fear. Now he gave her something even greater: belief. Belief that she was worth saving. Her voice was soft, trembling. Why risk everything? For me, the human opened. His eyes, his gaze steady as always. Because no one else will. The same words again. Simple, but heavy, carrying a truth deeper than she could bear. Tears filled her eyes. For so long she had believed she was cursed, worthless, abandoned. But now, as she sat in the glow of the fire, guarded by a human who had given everything, she began to believe something else. Perhaps she was not cursed. Perhaps she was chosen. The night grew quiet. The widow leaned against the rock, closing her eyes. For the first time, she dreamed not of death but of survival. The dawn came slowly, painting the horizon in soft gold. The widow woke to the sound of birds calling from far away, their voices strange but gentle. She stretched weakly, her body still fragile but stronger than before. For a moment, she thought, it was all a dream: the human, the bread, the fire. But when she opened her eyes, he was there, sitting nearby, sharpening a piece of stone into a blade. He turned his head as she stirred. You slept, he said. His voice was calm, steady as always. She nodded faintly. Because you watched. The human did not answer, but his faint smile was enough. They began their walk again. The land stretched before them, empty and wide. Her legs were weak, but every step carried more strength than the day before. The human stayed close, steadying her whenever she stumbled. His patience never broke, even when progress was slow. By midday they reached a small stream hidden between rocks. The widow gasped at the sight of water flowing, clear and fresh. She fell to her knees, cupping her hands to drink. The human filled the flask, handing it to her before taking any for himself. She wanted to argue, but his eyes silenced her. She drank deeply, the cool water filling her with new life. When she lifted her head, always alerting the horizon again, always alert, always ready, his body was tired, his face lined with hunger, yet his spirit stood unbroken. Her voice trembled. "You give everything, yet you ask for nothing." The human's answer was quiet. "I ask that you live." Her chest tightened. For so long, she had been waiting to die. Now, because of him, she was learning to live again. As they rested near the stream, shadows moved across the rocks. The widow stiffened. Her people, the same ones who had cursed her, left her, attacked the human. They stood in the distance, watching. Their eyes were filled with hate, but also with fear. They remembered the night before, remembered how the human had fought them barehanded and won. One of them shouted across the rocks, "You cannot save her, human. She will bring your death." The human rose slowly to his feet. His hand rested on the stone blade he had carved. His voice carried across the stream, steady and sharp. "If death comes, it will come to me, not." To her, the widow's heart raced. Her people spat in disgust, but none dared step closer. Fear held them back. One by one, they turned away, vanishing into the rocks. The widow collapsed in relief, her breath shaking. "They will not stop," she whispered. "They will always hate me." The human knelt beside her. "Then let them hate. Their hate does not decide your life." Her eyes filled with tears. No one had ever spoken such words to her. No one had ever stood against her own people for her. She reached out, her trembling hand touching his arm. "Why do you never fear?" He looked at her, his gaze steady. "Because I have already chosen. Your life is worth my fight." The words broke something inside her, broke the wall of shame and pride that had chained her since her husband's death. She lowered her head, tears falling freely. For the first time in so long, she allowed herself to weep. Not from hunger, not from fear, but from hope. That night, as they sat by the fire, the widow spoke softly. "You should have left me. Ow. You should have saved yourself." The human shook his head. "If I left you, I would lose myself. A man is not measured by what he keeps, but by what he gives." Her heart pounded. She thought of all he had given: his food, his water, his cloak, his strength, his fight. He had given her everything, and in return, asked only that she live. She whispered into the flames, her voice trembling but clear, "Then I will live. Not only because of you, but for you." The human's eyes softened, but he said nothing. He only placed another piece of wood on the fire, keeping the light alive. When morning came, the widow rose with new strength. Her steps were still slow, but her spirit no longer bent. She walked beside the human, not behind him. For the first time, she felt like more than a burden. For the first time, she felt like a partner in survival. As they climbed a ridge, the valley opened before them, green fields in the distance, smoke from a village rising into the sky. The widow's breath caught. Life, food, shelter, a place to begin again. She turned to the human, her voice filled with wonder. "What now?" He looked at the horizon, then at her. His answer was simple, but it carried the weight of a new world. "Now we live." The widow's chest burned with emotion. She had been left to die, widowed, starving, swarmed by flies. But a human had given her his last meal, his last strength, his last hope. Because of him, she now walked into a new beginning. Her hand brushed against his as they stood at the ridge. For a moment, neither pulled away. The human said nothing, but the silence spoke louder than words. Together, they stepped forward. Two survivors, bound not by blood, not by duty, but by choice. A choice that had changed both their lives forever.